This video is to show you how to do back basted applique. And I've got one pattern here that I'm going to just explain a few things on. You'll notice that this is the way the pattern came. This is the printed side, and I want this mouse to be facing this way when I get my project finished. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to retrace the pattern darker and the opposite direction. So can you see that those are just opposite of one another? And I'm going to use this one just because it's easier to see through the fabric. Okay, next, this is my fabric, the right side of the fabric, and I'm going to place this right side down on top of that pattern, and I'm going to trace it. Now you can see a lot of these traced lines. Some of them have been stitched on, and that's the next step that we're going to do, but so just try and ignore those. But I traced everything on here except for anything that is not going to be appliqued. So these are going to be appliqued on, but I'm going to fold them around a piece of English paper piecing base, and so I'm going to take a paper that's those little hexagon shapes, and I'm going to just fold the edges around. So those don't need to be traced because I can fold the edges under and then just applique those on after. So I do have everything that needs to be appliqued. The 3 leaves, the stem, the poinsettia, the basket, the mouse. I do not have the mouse's tail because I'm going to embroider that. You'll notice that right here, the leaves just kind of end underneath that stem. And so let's look back at the pattern. And next we're going to analyze the order that everything needs to be appliqued in. So I know that I can see that I have to do the basket first, then I can do these 3 leaves, and the stem is last, and the end of those leaves will be tucked underneath the stem. Let's look at the leaf, or the poinsettias, the poinsettia leaves. This is number 1, and the reason why it has to be appliqued number 1 is because it's underneath these 2. This has to be the second petal because it's underneath these. And so you'll have to go through and just analyze your pattern, and sometimes I mark right on my pattern the order that I'm going to applique in. Okay, let's set that aside and let's look at another bigger project. This is a much bigger block. It's all traced, and we're going to work a little bit at a time. So I want you to look right down here. I've already appliqued on this 1 leaf. I'm going to do this one next, and this stem will cover up the 2 ends of those leaves. So what I've done is I've cut a little square of fabric that's the leaf color, and I've got it in place, and I held it up to the light to just make sure that when I look through from this side that there's fabric all around this leaf shape and that I have plenty of seam allowance. Now I'm going to pin everything in place, and as I pin, I'm going to make sure that that fabric on the bottom is nice and flat, and that as I pin, all these pins are going to face out. They're going to point out from the shape. And I just pin it so that the pin goes right across the drawn line of where I traced. You can put in as many pins as it takes to hold it nice and flat. And if you pin with all the pins going outwards, it helps the applique piece lie flatter on the other side. Now I'm going to turn it over, and I can see exactly where my leaf is going to go, and I've got plenty of seam allowance. Okay, the next step is basting this leaf onto the background. And I'm going to use a heavy thread. This is a YLI thread, and I like the gold color because it shows up on most everything. If I was doing a gold leaf, this wouldn't show up very much, so I might choose a darker color. But this is what the end of the spool looks like. It's YLI quilting thread. It's a heavier thread. Next is your needle. I like to use this size 8 needle, and it's large, and it is easy to thread, and it works really nice. Okay, so I'm going to come up underneath here, and I'm going to come up right on the line, and I have a knot, and the knot will stay on the front of my project. That way I can unpick it later really easy. Okay, can you see there? Next I'm going to baste all around that traced line. And as I go across pins, I'll just take them out and set them aside, and I'll continue on around the project, around that shape. Try and baste as accurately as you can. Stay right on the line. And you want to make your stitches small. And I know that it maybe sounds a little bit counterintuitive. When I think of basting, I think of gigantic stitches. When you're back basted applique, you do not use big stitches. This basting is probably about 1/8 of an inch. And you want the stitches to be a little bit larger on the front rather than the back, because we're going to be clipping these. And you have to use little sharp pointed scissors anyway, but it helps if you've got it so that you can slide the tip of your scissors underneath those stitches. Now I would continue all around with this until I'm back to where I started and the entire shape is basted on. I'm going to actually end this now just so that I can move on in the video. And so I'm going to set this aside and move to another leaf that I have all done. And that is right here. This is another leaf. I've got it all basted. You can see that all around that entire shape it is done. Okay, so now we'll turn it to the front and show you the next step. Okay, the next step is a little bit tricky, and you're going to have to just practice this because you will know when you've got it to the right size of seam allowance after you practice and do a few. So for your very first one, I want you to do a skinny 1/4 or a fat 1/8 inch seam allowance, and you're just going to trim all along that shape, trimming off the applique piece. Be careful not to nick the fabric underneath your background. You don't want to ever cut that. And you'll notice I'm to where I started my stitching there. You can see my knot on the front and the end of my thread. I don't ever tie a knot at the end. We just keep it like that. Now this leaf is pointed where it attaches to the stem, and it's curved out here. And it's always the best idea to start on a flat side and work into the point first where it attaches. Because if it happens to move a little bit or something, I know that I started here and this is going to be in the right spot. And this isn't as critical out here if I move it a little bit. Okay, you're going to take some little sharp pointed scissors and you're going to clip about every other stitch. And it's a little bit tricky sometimes. Your scissors will want to snag on the fabric. Just be patient. And you're going to leave the stitches in until you're ready to turn under that area. Okay, so I've clipped for a little ways. Now I'm going to take out a little bit of that stitching, and sometimes you can just hook it with your, sorry, I wanted to make sure I was in the frame of the photo. Okay, I've undone just the stitches just right there. I've just picked them out and flicked them away. Now I'm going to take the tip of my needle and I'm going to just fold under that seam allowance. And then from behind, I'm going to take now my applique thread, and I've got a knot behind, and I'm going to take one little stitch. Okay, so you can see that where I turned it under is just right in line with those basting stitches. I'm in the right spot. If you want to check, you can turn over and you should be pretty close to that drawn line. If you're a little bit off, don't worry about it. And you will get to where you're better and better at guessing where you're going to come up. Okay, I'm going to take out another little basting stitch, and using my needle as my tool, I'm going to turn that under and take another little stitch. And so you just kind of use your needle as your turn under tool, and as you go along, you're just going to flick away those other little threads as you come to them, the gold threads, and keep stitching around. Now the thread that I'm using now is a 50 weight cotton thread, and my stitches are about 1/8 of an inch long. And the thread that let's see, I said 50 weight thread, the needle size is a size 10 or 11 millimeters. This is a very fine small needle, and you can get nice little stitches with that. Now I'm coming up to the point, and I can tell where this seam comes up and where this one is going, that I am now at that point. So I'm going to take just one more little stitch right there in that same spot and pull it away from me towards that point. My thread's coming away there. Okay, now I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to tuck under. First I'm going to undo some of these bastings. I'm going to tuck under once, and then I'm going to tuck under again, and I will continue up the other side. So see, I hope that you can notice how you're going to use your needle as your turn under tool. You will just continue appliquing around this leaf, undoing a couple of stitches of basting, and then stitching up to that next point. And this is how you do back basted applique. So let's just refresh a little bit. First thing you're going to do is you're going to reverse your pattern and retrace it. Then you're going to lay your fabric right side down on that retraced pattern, and you're going to trace the design onto the back. Use a micron Pigma pen or a mechanical pencil. Then you're going to decide what order you're going to applique in, and you're going to, based on your first piece, when you're basting, you're going to use YLI hand quilting thread and a size 8 millimeters needle. After it's basted, you're going to trim the seam allowance, and then you're going to clip the threads, and then you will start undoing those and appliquing down using a size 11 or 10 needle, a millimeter's needle again, with a 50 weight cotton thread. And that is back basted applique.